I believe we left off on the mechanism of Hatara.
All right.
Did you have me somewhere else?
No, I thought that you didn't do the Shulchan Aruch here there. But
You
maybe
mean-
I'm wrong. Maybe I marked it wrong. Just,
You mean on the top?
yes.
So Kodem Shiatiru Lo. So the Shulchan Aruch Yoredeya Reish Kaf Chet says, Kodem Shiatiru Lo Tzarch Shifaret Lema Neder. We were discussing the issue whether you have to detail the specific neder or not. So according to Shulchan Aruch, you do. Vasiba shebishvilo neder. He has to give the neder and why he took the neder. Vim lo parat, ein hataras natara. If he doesn't detail exactly what neder he took, the nullification doesn't work. Umiyu k'sheyifrod le'echad mematirim sagi. Even if he just details it to one of the, let's say it was a bezdin of 3, and he only reported it to one, that would work. Now, how does Hatara of Nedarim work? The essence of Hatara is based upon the fact that one who took the vow regrets initially accepting the neder. And there are 2 different potential ways to nullify a neder using Hataras Nedarim. Number 1, charata, where you express complete regret that he made the neder initially. 2, he's given a petach, an opening. One declares that had he considered some specific factor at the time of the neder, he never would have made the neder initially. The Gemara Nedarim, Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, records a machlokes as to whether the first opinion, charata, is in fact a valid method of performing Hataras Nedarim. Amar Rav Yud Amar Rav Asi, Ein Chacham Rashai Lahatir. A Chacham cannot be matir a neder ela ke'ein arba nedarim alalu. It has to be vows that were taken by mistake. The footnote says, if he takes a neder zruzin, like to exhort himself to do something, or a neder havoy, an exaggerated neder, or an unintentional neder, shogin, or onsin, something happened beyond his control. These are nedarim whose acceptance is by mistake. So the Gemara seems to say that a chacham cannot be matir neder only if it was like one of these nedarim, which is a mistake. Which means ksavar ein poischin b'charota. You don't start out by asking him, does he regret taking the neder? However, Rav Huna savar poischin b'charota. So Rav Asi and Rav Huna have a machlokas amayroim. Rav Huna says you may use the charota. Hahuda asla kamed Rav Huna. A person came in front of Rav Huna to be matir neder. Omer leilibcha alech. Do you still have the same desire that you had when you made the neder? Omer leilo. He says no. Bisharya. That seems to be a mechanism of regret. Now, the Ran there in Masechta Nedarim explains the reason behind the first opinion. Why shouldn't you use charata as a method of Hatara? Because it's not clear from his regret alone that the vow was taken in error, which is the case for those 4 vows that they agreed could be matir. As perhaps he regretted the neder later, but not initially. The concept of regret is that you regretted mamish from the start. Says the Ran, Ein chacham matir, el kein arba nedarim alalu. It's got to be like those 4 mistaken nedarim. Kloimar, a chacham she'ein lo lahatir b'charota, ela b'petach. You have to use the method of sort of opening up. The neder, if you're going to use Pesach, mochiach mitocho shu neder tos. He shows that the whole neder was taken in mistake, and therefore havikein arba nedar. Aval b'charata lo. Just regretting might not do that because v'hainu tam at adav petach b'charata. The reason that petach is better than charata if you should call neder. Shehu neder bepetach, every neder which is undone through an opening, harei hanoider oimer, shafilu b'tchila k'shenoder ilo haya noted a liba also pesach lo haya noider. A pesach is, you know what? If you would have known that one of the problems with your neder is this and this and this, would you have made the neder in the first place? That's what you try to show him with a petach. And every petach basically leads to the person realizing that if he would have known that before he made the neder, he wouldn't have made it. So it creates every neder to be a neder betos. Aval neder shu niter b'charota. If you only use the concept of regret, so eina motze im atzmo shum inyan. It's not like he thought of something that originally, if he would have thought of it, he would have gotten out of it. It's not that he goes back initially and he's regret. Oh, mitocha kas, because of the anger that it's created, or I was, very quick, and that's why I made the neder. Now he says he regrets that he ever took the vow at all, but it's not as clean as giving him a petach. The Shulchan Aruch rules in Yoredeya Reish Chav Ches that either the method of Pesach or Charot is valid, but the Charot must be complete regret that he took the vow, not regret that he experienced later. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Mishnah Schayt Bikra Neder, somebody who regrets the vow initially, so Eina Tzorach Pesach, you don't have to find a Pesach for him. Ela Shi Shalenu HaChacham. The Chacham should ask him, Ata Chofetz B'Neder Zeh, do you want this neder to still be operative? V'hu Omer Eina Chofetz Bo, I don't want it. In fact, I regret l'chatchila that I made a neder. And that's enough. Umatir lo. Umiyu. That works by him having regret going back initially. In fact, to the point where he was in a mental state where he wouldn't have made the neder ever. Avalim Omar, but if the Chacham interrogates him and the person says, yeah, sha'atahu mischare, only now I regret it. But v'ad chafetz b'mashanother, but from the time that he made the neder until now, he didn't really have a problem with the neder. Then, the Chacham should warn the guy who made the neder, Shlo Yomer Shemischart Mikaro, Elim Ken Borolo, Shaya Rotza Shlo Neder Boilam. He has to tell the noider of the neder that unless he was really mischarit from the beginning, he shouldn't say he was. Because She'im Lo Kain, Eina Atara Torah, it's not a good Atara. V'hu B'Yisrael Neder Kol Yomov. And it remains a prohibited neder for his whole life. V'meina mischarit. So therefore, if he's not in a matzav where he regrets the neder, tzarich levakish lo pesach. He has to ask the chacham to give him a pesach, lo yomar lo. Ilo ayita yodeh davar zeh means if you would have known such and such and such that happened because you made the neder, would you have made the neder? And he says no. Ilo ayita yodeh davar zeh lo ayiti noder. V'nimtza neder nekar meikar. So that's the structure. So the custom today is not to rely on charata alone, due to the possibility that perhaps the person does not truly regret having taken the vow from the outset. Plus the fact that some hold it is not effective alone without a Pesach. Likewise, the custom today is not to rely on a Pesach alone either, since there are numerous details associated with it, and not every factor is given the status of a valid Pesach. Instead, the Ramah here in Reish Chav Ches states that the custom is to use the charata as a form of Pesach. In other words, the person explains why he regrets having taken the vow. And the Chachamim ask him, had you known that you would regret it, would you have made the neder? He then answers that he would not have taken the neder. And his vow can be permitted in that manner. And therefore we ensure that charata is complete, and that a valid Pesach has also been created, and therefore the neder is permitted. Says the Ramah, mina charota Pesach. You create a Pesach using charota. When he says, you know what, I regretted that I made the neder. If you would have known when you made the neder that later on you would regret having taken the neder, klum nadarta, would you have made the neder at all? V'hu omer lo, az matirin lo. Then they can go through the formula, which we'll learn tonight how to do it. They can then matir the neder. Now the Shach explains, that's there as well in Reish Chav Ches, explains first that his expression of regret that he ever took the vow is effective in permitting it, since he states that had he known he would regret it, he never would have vowed in the first place. Therefore, the vow is entirely uprooted. Az batirin lo, b'tzona lomar, afilu below Pesach acher. You don't have to come with any other Pesach except for regret. You ask him, did you regret you made the neder? And he says, yes. And he says, based on that regret, would you have made it in the first place? And that's already enough. Ela b'charata greda matirin lo. When they use the charota as the Pesach, why does that work? You can't claim that maybe he's not an expert in knowing really what regret is. And Shemai Achavitz Benidrad Ato, that maybe he really wanted the neder up until now. Even though he says, that when he says he regrets, even if it's not true, but then when he says, that if you would have known, you would have regretted, the Bachi Sagi, Rishach says that's enough. Okay, so who can perform Hataras Nedarim? According to Gemara Nedarim, either 3 lay people, like what we do on Erev Rosh Hashanah, or 1 rabbinic expert. Both are capable of being matir neder. Tanya Dich says Masech Nedarim Ayin Ches Omer Aleph. Nemar kan ze adover. It says in Parshas Nedarim ze adover. The Nemar lahalon ze adover. That's when he talks to Aaron HaKohen by shchutei chutz, by the prohibition of shechting a korban outside of the Azorah. So, ma b'shchutei chutz, Aaron uvon v'chol Yisrael, av Parshas Nedarim, Aaron uvon v'chol Yisrael, which seems to be 3 different people. Uma kan Roshei Amatois, af lahalan Roshei Amatois, which seems to imply leaders. So the Parshas Nedarim, what do you mean? L'may hilchasa? What does this have to do with Parshas Nedarim? Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov, lahachshir shloisha hedyotos, that 3 balabatim who are not rabbinic authorities, 3 lay people, can serve as a bezdin. Ay v'harosh amatos ksiv on Rav Chizvi Tem Rav Yochanan b'yochid mumcha. By a mumcha, then your yochid is enough. So the Shulchan Aruch says, Misha Nodav and Ischaret, Yesh Takana de Charata, you can get out of it through Charata. Vafilu Nodav Belokei Yisrael, even if you used Hashem's name. Kei said Yasa, Yelech Etzel Chacha Mumcha, the Gomer V'Savir. He has to go to a Talmud Chacham who's a Mumcha, who knows how to learn. But today, since we do not consider any scholars today to be experts who can perform the Hatara alone, the Shulchan Aruch in the continuation of the same halacha rules that all Hataras Nedarim must be performed in front of a bezdin of 3, which means 3 balabatim as well. Could be a Rav too.
Barely said anything. And it's because you didn't talk to 3.
V'mein yachid mumche, yelech etzel shlosha hedyotos. V'ha'idna ein mumche she'ei roi later b'yachid. Shulchan Aruch says very clearly that in our time, there is no mumche who could be matir halachically by himself. It seems from the Gemara in Shulchan Aruch that the three individuals who comprise the Beis Din, who are termed Hedyotos, do not need to be rabbis or have any specific training. Are there any other requirements concerning these three individuals? According to the Shulchan Aruch, although these individuals need not be great Torah scholars, they must have at least some element of Torah knowledge and know how to suggest a petach for the neder. They have to know the mechanism of the halachos we learned tonight, of the charata concept, of asking him if he has regret, and based on the regret, if he knew he was going to be regretting, if he knew that he would have been that he regretted making the neder, would have even made the neder in the first place. That's the basic structure that the judge, that the people sitting on the bezin need to understand. Says the Shulchan Aruch weiter, Imein Yachid Mumche, Yelech etzel shlosha edyotos, Behud Gmir Lu V'Svir, but they also have to know the halacha. The Gam Yodim Liftoch Lo Pesach V'Yatiru Lo. They have to be able to open up the Pesach. I'm just getting something to drink. 1 second, please. Says the Shah that they must be able to understand the relevant concepts if explained to them. You teach them, and if they understand, that's okay. Even if not one of them learned it on his own. Even if all three Yotos were trained by other people, the sovereign, they understand matirim. They're allowed to be matir neder. The Hataras of the levush, kasavuhu the gomer luhu, the savri ktas. He's learned the subject matter. He understands a little bit. He has to understand how to permit. They don't have to be experts. And that's the custom. So that now, what is there are differences though between the Beis Din of Hataras Nedarim and a regular Beis Din. What are those differences? Although Dayanim, rabbinical judges, for regular cases heard in Beis Din, may not be relatives of the contestants, it is permitted for relatives of the one seeking to receive Hatara to serve as Dayanim for Hataras Nedarim, or even for two Dayanim who are relatives of each other, as explains by the Gemara Nedarim. So we don't follow all the rules of Beis Din. Amarle Abai Kivan Desviralon, Afilu Me'umid, Afilu Bekroivim. That means normally rabbinic judges sit in Beis Din. So Abai is saying by Hataras Nedarim it works Afilu Me'umid. Even if the Beis Din are standing or their relatives, Afilu B'layla. Now we know the din is that Beis Din only operates in the daytime, not at night. But you can do Hataras Nedarim at night. Lo mischazi kedina. It doesn't follow the complete format of a regular din. And the Rambam codifies this as the halacha, as does the Shulchan Aruch, and explains that the procedure of Hataras Nedarim is not treated as a regular court case. The Gemara also explains why it's permitted to perform Hataras Nedarim on Shabbos. The reason given is that it does not look like regular judgment of a court case. The Achronim offer various suggestions as to why Hataras Nedarim should be different than a regular case in Beis Din, such as the fact that it does not involve administering any punishment, and there's no need to write anything down. So you can do Hataras Nedarim even on Shabbos. Says the Rambam in Hilchos Shvuos, Hakroivim ksherim la'atir nedarim Shvuos. She'ein ha'heter zedin. The Hatar is not really like a din in Beis Din. Similarly, Hataras Nedarim may be performed at night or on Shabbos, even though normal Beis Din cases does not operate at night and does not operate on Shabbos. Says the Shulchan Aruch also in our same siman, Reish Kav Ches, Keitzad hi Hatara. Yomer la shalosh pamim muterlach, 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 or sharuilach, or machulach. And the Rama says, b'chol lashon shiur, you can say it in any language. Vafilu me'umid, you could do it standing, uvikroivim, uvalayla, uvashabbos. Afilu mayav shalom e'etzmol, yishar lalav. And even if it could have been done on Friday, you still can do it on Shabbos. But the Hataras Nedarim on Shabbos should be because a person made a neder that somehow is related to Shabbos, and without the Hataras Nedarim, he wouldn't be able to do it. So it's got to be a tzorach Shabbos, otherwise not. For example, kagon shenadar shloi lechol. Person took a neder, I'm not going to eat. So to be matir neder, to allow him to partake in oinik Shabbos, you can be matir's neder. On the other hand, some of the regular rules of the Bezdin do apply. For example, women and children may not serve as dayanim for Hataras Nedarim. That's the Sefer HaChinuch says. Noegas mitzvah ze b'chol makam v'chol zman, b'schorim avalo b'nekevis. Males only. Why? She'enan ru'uyin leheter nedarim. The Chinuch just says they're not roy, they're not appropriate. Why? So Rabbi Akiva Eiger explains that the difference between relatives permitting nedarim and women not permitting them is that women are fundamentally not allowed to serve as dayanim, while male relatives above bar mitzvah, fine, they might not be able to serve on a bezdin with you if you are the baldin, but they could technically serve as a dayan. Fundamentally, they're allowed to do so. Says Rabbi Akiva Eiger on his Hagos in Yordeya, Nir lani is daiti the isha lo the davka krovim the ein apsul begufo. A karov is otherwise permitted to serve as a dayan. The roy lodun lamishen a krovo. He can serve as a dayan for someone who's not a relative to him. Or v'chein b'layla layla gorim. Belek apostle begavra, there is no psul negavra, v'chein cotton, nir lani is daiti the gam cotton apostle lodun. Cotton is also apostle lodun for the same reason. Now, can you send a shaliach? You can't make it out for Hataras Nedarim Erev Rosh Hashanah. You want to send a shaliach to be matir your neder. So in most areas of halacha, an individual can appoint a shaliach to perform a mitzvah on one's behalf. Now, we understand certain mitzvahs that are totally begufo, you can't appoint a shaliach. To put on tefillin. You can't appoint a shaliach to put on tefillin for you. That's a mitzvah begufo. You can't appoint a shaliach to shake a lulav for you. That's a mitzvah that you have to do begufo. You can't appoint a shaliach to eat matzah for you. That's a mitzvah begufo.
What about like Hashavas Aveda? You find something, can you give it to someone to take it back?
Yes, you can.
You can, right?
Yeah, that you can. Because that's not totally begufo. It's totally in getting the Aveda back to the person. Right? Right? Tefillin you have to put on.
It's not, you have to give it back to him.
No, I think Hashavas Aveda can be done derech shlichus. Because there, the hechatimts is to get the Aveda back to the person. Now remember, it's always better bo yoiser mishlucho. You'll get more schar, you'll have schar alicha. Still better for you to do it.
Is that true?
Probably mitzvah and a mufcher to do it, but I don't know. Listen, we'll have to see. I think Hashavas Aveda can be done, but we will have the halachos of Hashavas Aveda in Chosh and Mishpat, which Mirz Hashem will learn. So we apply the principle of Shaliach Adam Kamoso. A person's agent is equivalent to himself. The classic cases, you can give kiddushin to a woman derech hashaliach. You can send a get derech hashaliach. Many things can be done through a shaliach because it's not necessarily has to be done begufo. However, with regard to Hataras Nedarim, the one who vowed must approach the bezdin or sage himself to ask release from his neder. Says the Rambam in Hilchos Shvuah, Zeh shenishba, hu sheyavel lifnei hachacham lahatir lo, bein ish bein isha, whether it's a man or a woman, ve'ena osa shaliach lishalo al nidra. So you see, the Rambam says it very clearly. Shulchan Aruch, again in our Siman, says Tzarech hanoider lavo lifnei matirim, kishiatir lo ve'ena osa shliach lishalo al nidra. You can't appoint a shaliach to be matir neder. Nevertheless, the Pischei Tshuva, remember, the Pischei Tshuva is like the Mishnah Brura on Yoredeya, right? He lived in the 1800s, right? The Mishnah Brura died in 1933, so we have a more recent super commentary on Orach Chaim. But the Pischei Tshuva is like is analogous to the Mishnah Brura, but it's printed in all regular Shulchan Aruch, so you don't need there's no other say. It comes with every Shulchan Aruch. So the Pischei Tshuva holds that in a case of necessity, one may appoint an agent for Hataras Nedarim, since most poskim hold that according to the Torah it is permissible. Says the Pischei Tshuva, Ein Beves Yosef, right? Rav Yosef Karo's commentary on the Tur. The Ravu HaMatir al Deksav let's say somebody sent his request for a Torah by letter. Zulas Harav Reb Yitzchak Bar Sheshes Kosav. Dinir Medivrei Rambam Dafilo al Yedei Ksav Aser. V'roi Lochush L'Dvarav. Ayin Sham. Which, right, the Rambam says you can't do it through writing, you can't do it through a Shaliach. But says the Pischei Tshuva, L'fi Zeh, because the Beis Yosef permitted being matir through writing, right? If one sent his request for a Torah with Charot and a Pesach in writing, so there was one Mandomer, Rav Yitzchak Bar Sheshes, who didn't, based on the Rambam, forbid it. But the Pischei Tshuva finds a tzad lahakel because of this Beis Yosef. B'shas Adchak. Now, would a wife be allowed to send her husband to perform Hatorah for her? This question is often relevant with regard to Hataras Nedarim before Rosh Hashanah, where women often are not in shul when the Hatorah is performed, but they could potentially appoint their husbands as their shaliach. Is this permitted? So the Gemara in Nedarim discusses this question directly, appears to permit it. With what condition? The husband should not gather dayanim lechatchila for that purpose. Meaning, if the dayanim have already gathered to be mater neder for someone, then you can be mater neder for your wife. And the Gemara in the Nedarim says, Ravina avalon nidra levdisu. Ravina's wife had a neder, and he wanted to be a shaliach for her. Also, Kabei Ravashi. So Ravina presented himself to Ravashi, Armalei, Baal Maushi Yasa Shliach L'Charot Ishto. Can a husband serve as a shaliach? I will present the charata that my wife has for making the neder. Armalei, Imachanfin in, Ilolo. If you had to gather the dayanim from scratch, we don't do it. But if they've gathered already, then you can. And that's the ruling given by the Shulchan Aruch in Reish Lamed Daled. The Shach explains that the reason this is different than the regular principle that one may not appoint a shaliach for Hataras Nedarim, we said before you can't have a shaliach. How come over here you can make a shaliach for your wife? Is due to the principle of ishto kegufo. It's like you. One's wife is like one's own body. So it's not a shaliach, it's like you doing it. Says the Shach, Avagav Damir Leinin Dein Adam Yochel Asa Shaliach Lishol Al Nidro, Baal Shaini De Ishto Kegufo Damya. Amazing halacha. Thus it would seem that it is permitted for a husband to perform Hataras Nedarim for his wife before Rosh Hashanah, since he did not gather the dayan together. They're already gathered for the purpose of all the rest of the people in the shul.
Is it clear that he has to have her permission?
Well, how do you know that your wife made any Nedarim? She has to tell you. I made Nedarim, and I wanted you to be Mater Neder for me.
Can you assume that she did? How do you know? Maybe you don't know what. How does she know that she even made them there if she doesn't know the halachas?
He can definitely be mater neder when she's not around that she made.
No, that you can only do within 24 hours, Sydney.
Yeah.
Baal is made for his wife's Nedarim for the first 24 hours, as long as he heard it. But we learned very specifically, Chaim, that you can't be matir neder unless what you're being matir. You have to have that in mind. So when we make an Hataras Nedarim, we have a certain formula, and we assume
But
we
we
make.
don't know. But so that applies to us too. We don't know what we did the whole year.
Exactly. We don't know
We're
if we made
gonna
Nedarim.
we're gonna come to that, but I don't think you could do it without your wife specifically making you a shaliach. It seems what it's saying here, right? Ravina
No, you took a gufo.
says she wished to have it dissolved. It's not that he did it on her behalf. He did it through her. And the reason why it works is because you took a gufo, because you can't normally use a shaliach. So you didn't use a shaliach. You are her. She is you. That's why it works.
Ernie, how is that different from machzus or shekel when you're giving money for other members of your family without them expressively telling you to do so? Why can't you do the same for Hataras Nedarim?
No, because Hataras Nedarim is a personal isser that a person has to lift from himself. This is begetter isser veheter. That's why Hilchos Nedarim is in Yoredeya, which deals with Isser Veheter. So the concept of Machtis HaShekel, we are allowed to be Zoichin La'adam Shaloi B'fanov. We use the principle of Zechia for mitzvahs. I am Zoicha for her, right? If you pick up a lottery ticket, a winning lottery ticket for Sydney, so you're koina for him because it's a schus for him. But if you pick up an IOU that, Sydney owes $10,000 to somebody, you can't be koina for him because it's a choy for him. So mitzvahs like machzis a shekel you could do because you're zoicha la'adam shaloi b'fanav.
Okay.
But regarding nedarim, it's probably different because it involves isser veheter, and she needs to know about it.
Okay.
But it's a shaila, it's a question. I think they don't really. It seems that the wife would have to let you know. Let's see what the Ravadia Yosef says. Af benadorm Baal nasa shliach li ishto. A Baal can serve as a shliach for his wife. Hechedim mekanfi v'kaimi, if they've gathered already. Kedisa benadorim. K'moshe noagim loymar shetatiru lanu l'nshenu. And maybe from the Ravadia Yosef, you maybe like Chaim, that you can just ask for yourself and for your wife. You assume that the wife made the Nedarim. Now, something very interesting, the Sefer Kol Nidre, which we said was a Sefer about Nedarim, reports that some contemporary poskim hold that there is no custom for women to appoint their husbands to perform Hataras Nedarim for them. Let me ask you a question. All of us have been doing Hataras Nedarim for over 50 years, right? Since we're a bar mitzvah. Do any of you remember making Hataras Nedarim for your wives?
I have.
Okay, I don't. It's not a no that I know of.
I have, and many people.
I have my wife in mind when I say the Hataras Nedarim. Why you're not
Yeah.
allowed to do that?
I didn't say you're not allowed to do it. I think it's.
Well, I do.
I think
I mean,
it's something that I myself.
I'm doing it for myself. I'm doing it for myself, and then when I'm doing it for myself, I say, and I have my wife in mind. And the assumption is that in case she did a neder, since I'm doing me at the same time, I'll be yotzei her.
Make
Because
that
you
work
can
because
because you can be mati your wife's and Nedarim in certain situations.
Yeah, but Walter, you can only do it in the first 24 hours. If you
But
identify,
I'm sure you got something in that 24 hours to be matir.
No,
Every 24 hours, you got something to be matir.
no, I understand, but we're talking about the Nedarim she made over the whole year.
Okay.
But can you say al chet and have your
It's
wife in mind?
lemafreya.
But the women
Oh,
say
you're
their
saying-
own al-chet.
So you're
I'm
telling
saying,
me,
but theoretically, according to this,
tell me that
Okay.
women,
How can you do vidui for someone else?
that's what I'm saying, or forgiveness on a neder, that's the same thing.
wait, so Ernie, so women, no women ever do a Tarzan Darim then?
Hang on. You can't bring a
Never
korban.
saw it.
The women brought their own korban chatas. The Gemara had a whole deal in there. Women, do they do smicha? Do they not do smicha? Now you could send a korban via shaliach. You certainly korban pesach could be done. You could send a korban ola, but I don't think you could send a chatas and an ashram that way. And women would send their own korbanos that way. Women are executed for their own averos. The husband doesn't get a punishment if the wife did an avera. They're an independent person. So we use the principle of ishto kegufo here in this case to go around the problem of shlichus by nedarim. But anyways, it's an interesting area. So listen to what the Kol Nidre says. Kol Nidre says it's not nohug in Klal Yisrael that men did Hataras Nedarim for their wives, that the women appointed their husbands to perform Hataras Nedarim for them. That the husband's not supposed to do it. Ella hanashim soimchos al Hataras Nedarim shel Kol Nidre she'oimrim b'tchilas Yom HaKippurim. The women go to shul. They hear your Kol Nidre, and he says, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Rav Vosner, Rav Sternberg are hold this way, that they rely on the Kol Nidre Yom Kippur night for the women's Nedarim. So, what do we actually? Yeah.
Why wouldn't we rely on our nedarim also for kol nidre? Why do we say Hataras Nedarim then?
Okay, that's a whole. I remember. First of all, I think Rabbi Bronner. I think I once heard Rabbi Bronner.
Yeah, he gave a drush on
gave
that.
a huge cheer on that once, maybe
Yeah.
10 years ago. So because Meikar Abdi and the Kol Nidre is not a formal Hataras Nedarim, I guess it works like this, but we do it in a more standardized way.
Why should a shliach tzibur be more effective than ishto kegufo?
Shliach.
Well, first of all, Shomer Ka'ona, whatever the Shliach Tzibur says, she says. And you can say along with the Shliach Tzibur as well.
And you're appointing the shliach tzibur on Yom Tov, so your whole davening on Yom Tov is taloi and the shliach tzibur.
So Ernie,
Yes.
so the question then is, the real question is, let's say I can't make a Darsan Darim. Can I say, Ernie, I appoint you to go to Beis Din and be and do the Hataras Nedarim for me?
No, we learned tonight that you can't appoint a Shliach for Hataras Nedarim.
That's for sure.
That's the Rambam. That's the first halacha we learned. You may not, ein osa shaliach lishalo al nidro. The only reason it worked by a wife is because ishto kegufa. It's not a shaliach.
Gufo. Yeah, it's not a shaliach. Ishto kegufo is
You're
like,
not serving as a shaliach because shlichus doesn't work by Hataras Nedarim.
Why are you saying you can only do it for your wife for the first 24 hours anyway, you said?
No. The wife, that has to do with mefer. If somebody hears his wife making a neder, you can be mefer in the first 24 hours. That's 6 months prior to Rosh Hashanah. Then we show up Erev Rosh Hashanah, we matter all over Nedarim for the whole year.
Mayfair without a Beis Din, you're saying?
Yeah, you can be made. A husband has the power to nullify his wife's Nedarim within the first 24 hours.
but Ernie, if
That's not
Isha,
hafara. That's
We're not
called
talking
hafara. That's mufa. It's a different process.
if ishto kegufo, so you have in mind to get rid of all your nedarim for the whole year, so automatically you do it for your wife. It's not only within the 24 hours.
But the ishto kegufo is being used as a halachic twist to get around the shlichus problem. I'm not sure it works. We just read the poskim who say that it's not a custom for women to appoint their husbands to perform Hataras Nedarim for them. Either because they have a problem with shlichus, maybe they don't accept ishto kegufo, and they said rather use kol nidre. Okay, it's a fascinating subject. anyways, what is the declaration permitting the neder? So let's say a person stood before Bezdin and they found a Pesach with Charata, and once the Petach or Charata has been expressed, the Dayanim declare the neder to be dissolved using the language given by the commentaries such as the Rambam. The Rambam in Hilchos Shvuos gives us the Nusach. Ketzad Matirim. Yavo Anishba L'Chacham Amuvak. The one who took the oath comes to the Chacham who's expert. O Lishlosha Hedyotos Imein Shamumcha, or the three Balabatim, the Oimer. Ani Nishbati Al Kach V'Kach. I took such a Shvuah. V'nichamti, I regret it. V'achacham Agadol HaShloisha Oimer Lo, Ukvar Nichamta, have you regretted it? V'hu Oimer Lo Hein, yes. Hoizer V'Oimer Lo, Shori Loch, or Mutter Loch, or Mochel Loch. You use those terminology that it's absolved or permitted. You could use any language. Right? This is what Chaim was saying before. Hafara is a different process. You cannot use the term mufr l'cha or nekra shvuascha, or it shall be uprooted. Right? The other person who can be mefer is the father of a nara, a girl between 12 and 12 and a half. So as well, if you heard the neder within a certain period of time, you can be a husband, an av could be made. The lashon is binura beisavia, that the father can be made for the neder of his daughter if she's a nara, and a baal can be made for his wife. Heter umechila, not mufer, not because it's not mefer, it's hatara. The Yalkut Yosef points out that the Dayanim need only make this declaration once, but the custom is to declare it 3 times. Mitzad adin daisher melonoider olanishba pamachas muter lecha, aval aminig loimer sholosh probably muter lecha lechazik ha'inyan. Like what we do by Hataras Nedarim Erev Rosh Hashanah, we say that whole paragraph 3 times. Now, let's analyze Hataras Nedarim of Erev Rosh Hashanah more carefully. Hataras Nedarim is customarily performed every year in Erev Rosh Hashanah, brought by the Shari Tshuva in Orach Chaim. Uvini Hataras Nedarim shenogim lasos be'erev Rosh Hashanah ayin b'shlo. Many of the halachas that we have discussed here apply there as well, such as the permission to have relatives serve as the dayanim. You can have your children in the Bezdin when you do Erev Rosh Hashanah, or to perform that Torah at night. In fact, some do it the night before. However, other halachas do not appear to be followed in the same manner. For example, one does not specify any nedarim. Like Chaim said, we're not specific about any nedarim, Erev Rosh Hashanah, or customs adopted within the standard text used. Remember, we said that if a person had adopted a certain minhag, he wants to get rid of it, so you have to do Hataras Nedarim. How come we don't throw that in there? Let's say Erev Rosh Hashanah, we come to be Matir Neder with Hataras Nedarim. How come we don't detail any private Nedarim that we made or any customs that we want to get rid of? Even though we mentioned above that one must normally specify the vow for which one is requesting a Torah. We said if he didn't do it, the Torah is lacking. Nevertheless, the Sefer Derech Chaim writes that this generic text is not effective for Nedarim that one remembers and can specify in front of the Dayanim. That means if you have a specific neder to be matir, you got to be matir that as a separate neder. This generic text is not made for that. And it's not effective for Nedarim that you remember. Right? Masha nogim b'Hataras Nedarim loymar. Af shemitzad adin mevakish haTorah tzarich lifrot haneder. Remember, we say that lashon, that even though mikra din you're supposed to detail the neder, ach de'una raboisi ki ef shalofortam. I can't specify them. Ki rabim hein. Ze'ein moil el nedarim sheshochach. So Hataras, the language that we use, are nedarim that our brain forgot about, which is all of them, basically. How many of us remember that we made any real neder? Aval nedarim shaloi shachach. But let's say you have a certain neder in mind, the zocherotam tzarich latiram, and tzarich lifat neder. So maybe in that nusach you got to detail the neder. V'im la vein matirin lo. The basis for this principle can already be found in the Tosfos Rid, who wonders how the ceremony of Kol Nidre is effective on the night of Yom Kippur. This too is designed to annul one's vows from the past year, and yet no one specifies any details of vows during the Kol Nidre. How then can this be effective? The Tosfos Rid explains that one is required to specify the vow only when one knows and remembers the vow taken. But if one does not remember any specifics, then the generic form of Kol Nidre recited may be used. By the way, so I think Walter mentioned it. One of the things people learn is that you do Hataras Nedarim Erev Rosh Hashanah, and that takes care of your Nedarim for the whole year, and then you stand Yom Adin Rosh Hashanah. Now, what about the Nedarim you made in Aseret you made Tshuva? So that's what the Kol Nidre comes to wipe away. So that period between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Says the Tosfos Rid. When do you have to detail the neder if you know it? We are saying no Kol Nidre and things that we forgot. These are things we have no control over. We completely forgot about these Nedarim. We are shoygeg. And it's a good charata because if we would have known when we made the neder that we were going to forget it, and the congregation sort of forgives each other. And the neder is uprooted. Right? We say b'yeshiva shalmala b'yeshiva shalmatu anu matirin. Right? We use that language. Yeshiva shalmala b'yeshiva shalmata v'asamaka anu matirin lispalel. There we ask forgiveness. Excuse me. We ask reshus to daven with the avaryonim. Yeah, we don't say Hataras there. Now, Rav Elyashiv uses the same idea to explain the formulation used, but my teachers, you should know that it is impossible to specify them since they are many, to mean that since there are so many, one does not remember them. That is why that Torah is effective even without specifying the vows. Says Rav Elyashiv, Elishab Derech HaChaim, which we quoted, he may be Shibolei Aleket the Davka Kishoich Neder Avalim Shochach V'Yavshol Lefaret. But if he forgot in the dorm and he can't detail them, you could be matir without the detail. Because there's so many, I don't remember them. It's a reason why I can't detail it. Comes out that it's not midoraisa. The requirement to detail the neder is only midrabanan. Another element of that Hataras Nedarim practice for Rosh Hashanah is the mysterious modah, right? At the end, after the Bezdin says Harei Mechulim Lach, Harei Mechulim Lach, Harei Shalom Lach, right? Then we go again and we say a final paragraph. That's called Mesiras Hodah, where we declare that all future Nedarim that we may take during the upcoming year are nullified from the start and are not valid. This concept is measured in the Gemara Nedarim, which concludes that the Modah is valid only if one does not remember it at the time the neder is later made. That means that statement that we make that all the future Nedarim, then if you do not remember it at the time, the fact that you made the modah, when you later make that neder, that modah is effective. If you do remember it, the modah is not effective, is what they're going to say. Person who doesn't want his nedarim to take hold the whole year, you should say in advance, any vow that I make should be nullified. You got to make sure that you don't remember that when you do make a neder, you made such a modah, because then that would uproot that. In addition, the Ramah says that although in theory such a declaration should be effective, in practice one should not rely on this modah to assume that any neder taken does not take effect. The Ramah here is addressing Kol Nidre and the night of Yom Kippur, but the same would apply to our practice of Hataras Nedarim before Rosh Hashanah. The Ramah says also about Kol Nidre, don't use Kol Nidre to prevent you from fulfilling your Nedarim. That if you make a neder, you have to fulfill it. Don't rely on the Hatara and Kol Nidre to get out of it. Rather, one should perform a regular Hatarim if possible. So let's say 6 months later you made a neder. You need to do Hataras Nedarim. You can't rely on the, says the Ramah. You made it tonight. I guess for tzorach gadol, you can use it, but otherwise we don't use that. Now we'll see whether this is the halacha regarding minhagim, or whether there's more reason to allow relying on this modah that we make regarding performing Hataras Nedarim for a custom. I'm going to stop here. I think we covered a lot of ground. I think we will definitely finish it. All we have left is doing Hataras Nedarim for minhagim. And we will also start Sfiras HaOmer next week, God willing.
Okay.
Ernie, which one?
Any other